Welcome to the Deployed Podcast, where strategy, ideas, and capital come to life.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of Deployed. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Camoin. I'm a real estate investor and fund operator. Over the years, I've worked with a wide range of investors who have built successful business owners, operators, professionals, many of whom eventually start to ask the same question. Is there a smarter way to deploy capital, especially retirement capital, outside the stock market? When Deployed, I'm not here to pitch. I'm here to understand how successful people think about capital, risk, and long-term decisions, and explore how tools like the self-directed IRA may fit into that thinking. Today, I'm joined by Michael Camoin. He's a filmmaker who established Room G0395. He was recognized as a best local filmmaker by Times Union and Metroland and the Upstate Independence Network. He is also co-founded and voted Best Local Filmmakers Resource. Thanks for joining us today, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Glad you could be here. So before we talk investing, I love just for some context, right? What did your path to success look like? How did that happen?
Wow. I got a camcorder in 1992, just graduated with a master's in social work.
Okay.
And I was moonlighting as a filmmaker. I found a subject that grabbed my attention. There were no classes that I could take here in Albany on filmmaking at that time. So I would go down to New York City and train with some of the best documentary filmmakers, and also studied marketing your product, your film. And I found I loved the aspect of filmmaking and storytelling. I needed to find a subject that held my attention because I learned that documentary filmmaking took years. The average gestation of a film might be 7 years. And I wanted to see if I could speed that up. And so I produced my first documentary, Inside the Blue Line, about an aging Adirondack woodsman in way up New York in the Adirondacks in 6 years.
Mm.
And I took a course on marketing and self-distribution. And so I didn't leave my success in the hands of whether someone liked my film or not. I learned how to distribute it, and that's what I did. And it was like going door to door back when I was a kid, selling seeds to neighbors and things like that. And, just knocking on doors. Do you want to buy this? And I was having success with that. And, just brought that to another level with, hey, here's a story that I really fell in love with. Do you want this in your shop? And what I learned early on was what you're selling has to look and feel like a movie. And that the big part of that is marketing. So the other half of the whole filmmaking experience is learning to market and tell your story. And so I learned that a video was treated like a book in the retail market. So I needed an ISBN number and those kinds of things. And people started buying it. And I had screenings, I had press and reviews, and word of mouth was a big part of my early success. And as I mentioned, there was no course here in upstate New York. So I started a network for other filmmakers.
Wow.
In our first meeting, there was 13 people that showed up. I took a little ad out in the Metroland, which is the art music scene in Albany, and people showed up. And so we had another meeting. We grew. Our network grew to 325 people. People came from 5 different states to travel to our monthly meetings. And we had guest speakers, and then we influenced legislation. I saw that independent filmmaking could improve the local economy. Independent filmmaking increased real estate in wherever a movie's taking place. It's just this point of pride for that movie to succeed. And what was missing was a tax incentive. Movies, the industry in the early 2000s were going to other countries, and the United States was losing $6 billion to Canada because they were going across the border, whether in Vancouver or Montreal. A little independent filmmaker had this network, said, hey, New York State, we ought to pay attention to this. So in 2004, New York State enacted its first film tax rebate program.
Really?
Yep.
4?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that coincided with a federal tax incentive for investing in feature films, not documentaries, but other television content. Ultimately, those tax incentives went from 10% to 25 to 30 with an upstate bonus. That drew 18 television shows from California to New York.
Wow.
And then the scene just blew up in New York City. I was not part of that, but I was part of that first conversation in Albany, New York, saying we need to do something for little independent filmmakers because that is the foundation. That's the base for cultivating crew base that you can hire, a skilled crew base, so that they could serve on some of these larger projects. And I had seen how independent filmmaking, what that did for Montreal or Wilmington, North Carolina, and other places, Austin, Texas. I mean, these are all thriving places that learn to understand the business, art, and culture and its economic impact on a region.
Wow, that's
So
impressive.
there's my there's my story.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Just a quick question for you. So I've heard often that Chicago gives out tax benefits to maybe larger motion picture films. Is
Mhm.
that different than you lobbying for the small independent filmmaker? Did New York already have larger tax incentives for larger movies?
I think in the beginning they didn't discriminate, but a majority of those funds went to the larger pictures. With a little further conversation now, those smaller pictures are definitely part of the equation and the success you have in New York, not just in New York City, out to Long Island, all the way out to Buffalo, Rochester, where studios have popped up. And now the productions look for places like that, where there's going to be a skilled crew base where they can hire locally. That lowers their budget. They don't have to house them. They live locally. So it can be a cost savings for a production.
That's cool. That's cool. Now, as you became more successful, how did the way that you thought about capital evolve?
Well, I've worked on a number of other people's projects, and what I wanted to do was continue to work on my own projects. So what I needed to do in recent years is learn how to fundraise and figure out how to raise money for my own films. And so like my most current project, we've raised 325,000 on a docu-series called Brown and White, The Heart of Bonus Basketball. And one of the things that I've learned is that you need to be consistent, you need to be trustworthy and honest, and you need to be able to deliver so that people will continue to invest in you and what you're doing. And the other part of this is, again, I was working on other people's projects that they went off, they won top prizes at Sundance, Tribeca, Cannes, and Toronto. But how can I do that for myself? So part of that is taking this capital and, as they say, put it in front of the camera, or in this case, in a documentary, hire the right people. So right now I'm working with a world-class editor, Christopher Seward, who's worked with Michael Moore, Fahrenheit 9/11, and Sicko, and top programs. So you're learning how to put that money in the right place builds momentum because this is a series. So part of raising that capital is, again, you always have to show people that you can make use of their funds super well. And yes, we need more, but here's why. And you show them this. It's more than a demo. It's like, here's what we're doing. Here's episode 1. Okay, we want right now I'm at the moment where we want to fund the next 4 episodes. So I think having a respect for those funds and allocating them properly, and also like learning just how to. I have a financial advisor. The other part of this, I used to invest my own money in my own films, and then 9/11 hit in 2001, and the faucet just turned off. The funding sources dissipated, and I was left with debt and an incomplete project. And I had to say, never again. I really need to rely on other people who believe in a project and invest in it. Invest either through donations, and get a tax deduction, or a grant or a foundation. But for those people who want to see something come alive, it's this balance of my time and investment and theirs as well.
That's interesting. So for someone that invests or lends on your project, what type of general terms can you offer them? Like, how do you return them an investment?
Well, movies are a super risky investment, and documentaries at this stage, the market has changed. So I think you have to be honest. 10 years ago, we would say, hey, we're going to get a streaming deal from Hulu, Netflix, that you can't go out and promise that anymore. It's not how that works right now in the market. So documentaries are best funded by those who are looking for a tax deduction. One of the things I've learned recently, Michael, is a thing called donor advised funds. And this is where those people who need a tax write off at the end of the year are using these vehicles to put funds away that then are earmarked towards a not-for-profit charity, a fiscal sponsor, and it could go to any direction. So documentaries are funded and basically through donations like that, but it benefits the investors. And the amount of funds that are going into donor advised funds has grown considerably.
I
There's
can imagine.
I just looked online. In 2004, they did a study. There's $326 billion in donor advised funds.
Interesting.
Those monies need to go somewhere. They need to go to a non-for-profit to allow that donor to experience that tax write-off. And I was just thinking, like, I don't know if that could benefit in the real estate market, but if there's a nonprofit that the money goes to, that's the main requirement, is my understanding.
Interesting. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I'll definitely check into that because you can imagine. I've heard people say there's always two types of money problems. There's either too much or not enough. And to your point, I was just talking to a lender who's going to lend on one of my deals. And she was like, Michael, I don't want you to give me the money back for a year. Like, I want you to keep it longer. Don't give me the monthly payments. And I was like, okay. She was like, yeah, that solves the problem. You'll really help me out, because she was trying to do a 1031 exchange. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's when you sell a property and then immediately buy another property so that you don't get hit with the capital gains tax.
Mm-hmm.
Struggling to do that because all of the ideal properties, there's certain rules that you have to follow. They were going so quickly. So to your point, she has a too much money problem. She has a tax problem. Um, and then she said, oh, by the way, can you help me with my 401k too? I don't want to pay taxes on that. I want to move that over. So that's going to be one of my next case studies of lenders that I help. Like, I'm solving a money problem for her,
That's
and
right.
she needs to give me the money. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, cool stuff. Now, on the for-profit end of a feature film, a traditional investment is there's the creative side and the financial side.
Okay.
And there's 100 points. So 50 of those points go to the creative side and 50 of those points go to the financial side. And the financial side for coming up with the funds is going to get an extra 5 points from the creative side. So once a movie is completed, then you go to sell it. And the way it's released is basically the way it was taught to me is from the big picture down to the small one, which is, these little iPhones. So you hit on those sequential markets one after the other. There's usually a rhyme and reason to them. Ultimately, you're going to see revenues from each of those different markets, whether it's theatrical, non-theatrical, semi-theatrical, education, pay-per-view, advertising, VOD, a video on demand. And that can be replicated in every country if you've got content that's going to play. So horror films tend to do well. I'm not a horror film guy.
Horror documentaries or horror films in general?
Horror films in general.
Yeah.
Crime documentaries around crime tend to do well. They grab people's interest, and those tend to do well in the marketplace.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you said horror films do well. I forgot what I was watching. I'm big on, after I watch our show, I like to go to YouTube and watch the reviews. I just love doing that. And I forget where I heard it. Someone said that, horror movies are just dominating right now. Why is that from your perspective?
So we're kind of in scary times. So people are drawn to things that, equate to what they're going through. The industry, actually, one of the things I've learned is that they have stuff on the shelf right now that they will bring out. And it's either a horror film or a comedy, something that's going to make you laugh. So, and if you've got like something that's really a downer, they might save it for better times. Like, it's not a good time to release something like that. Like, that's the advice that I was given. So timing in the marketplace has to do with many other factors, that there are people in the distribution world that really pay attention to those kinds of things. And horror film tend to be like a 365 day a year kind of thing because there's always an audience. But sometimes it's really like that's what kids want.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting that you say that. So I remember when Jamie Foxx, I think he did Ray. And I think because he got nominated, they then released Jarhead with Jake Gyllenhaal, right? I remember that. See, Leave the World Behind. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that. I think that was released at the great time on Netflix because it was about kind of like the political and things going on.
Hmm.
And then there was another one that I just seen that I was telling another guest. I love movies and TV
That's cool.
with Idris Elba was playing the president, and they did a good job of showing what would happen if someone bombed Chicago
Okay.
and how the different perspectives of the government was trying to work together with this emergency. And they showed each character for about, 20 minutes. And then they showed another character and they retold the story from another character's perspective. But I thought, again, the timing with the political climate, it kind of made sense. So
Hmm.
thank you for sharing that. That makes total sense to me. Circling back to investing, and I love that you're sharing your experience from the filmmaking side because I don't think anyone ever really thinks about that. How do you personally think about risk today versus earlier in your career?
Okay, so early in my career, it was about can I do this personally? I shifted from being a social worker for 6 years to, okay, I'm part time to now I'm going to go full time. That was a big leap. What I needed to do was have support surrounding, like building that network and seeing that that's like possible. There's other like-minded people. We kind of supported each other. I would say like here's my inner operations is I know that it's going to be my psychology versus yours. I'm going to have to win the day of I've got this idea for a story. I've got to overcome two things. One is your resistance to this idea and my inner resistance that I have towards taking on something that's bigger than I've ever done. Movies, you never work on the same movie twice. You're always working on something different. And every movie succeeds in its own way. That's what they say about a movie that gets to Sundance. There's no one path that said you can copy that. You have to figure out that path. And for me today, because the project that I'm working on, like right now, Brown and White, The Heart of Bonus Basketball, is the story of the smallest NCAA Division I college basketball program that with an integrated team rises to be number 2 in the nation. It goes 22-0 in 1968 during the height of race riots, Vietnam, so much turbulence. And they win the day. They go on to reach the Final Four in 1970 with Bob Lanier. The school is St. Bonaventure. It's my alma mater. Today, I would say it's a matter of like, I dove into this story not knowing what I was going to learn. One of the things that I learned is the mecca of basketball is in Harlem. It's Rucker Park. And it was co-founded by one of the first 3 African Americans on this basketball team, 350 miles in rural Western New York, St. Bonaventure. Went back home to Harlem and co-founded Rucker Pro Tournament. And I was like, whoa. So part of today is like, for me today, it's like really learning to trust my instincts for story and going where the story is and then finding this hidden gem that, yes, it's true, but nobody's talking about it. And so connecting the dots, that's like one of the things that I do in terms of both the story and networking with other people, and then learning to use that kind of networking idea to get this thing out to market. So where I'm going is this story is way bigger than what I thought it was. Like the smallest school, and yeah, we won some things, but this is like, okay, and here's the connection. Dr. J from Philly credits our guys in Harlem for Rucker Park and what it meant for him and the career and the impact that it's had on him and other NBA players.
Mm-hmm.
All by doing what they were doing, which is just building a community around a playground in Harlem at 155th Street, and it becomes the global mecca. How do I know this? Well, I took my son to the National Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield. They have a 12-minute video on the history of basketball. They devote 45 seconds to Rucker Park on influencing the game. So when you dive into a story, I mean, it's pure guts that you think there's something here And then you discover that, and then you put that to film and you put that to story. And now you're changing people's perceptions about what you do, because filmmaking and story making is a mystery, but you're demystifying it for others. And that's when you start to get people on board. And that's when people start saying, "Oh, I want to see this story too."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Documentaries more than your average film do that. That's what's cool about documentaries. Like I just seen the documentary on Allen Iverson. Now, I'm a big basketball
Okay.
guy, so I know all about the Rucker Park. I know all about the
Oh,
history of basketball. Yeah, I can't wait to see your documentary. I played basketball. I'm 6'7", right? I'm a sports guy. So the documentary on Allen Iverson blew me away.
wow.
Watching him, when I was 16 years old, when he crossed up Michael Jordan, to now hear his story of what it was really like, and it was brutally honest. Me and my wife loved it. So,
Cool stuff.
I love docs. I love sports documentaries. The other one that was real good, Shooting Guards, Gilbert Arenas, about the shooting in the locker room. I thought the title was brilliant.
Wow.
And they told that story, what happened, man. So I'm excited for your film and what you're going to uncover, because I looked it up before
Cool, cool.
you got on the call. So yeah, man, I know you're going to do great stuff. And like you said, it's pretty cool. Here you were just thinking about your alma mater, and now you're uncovering and learning so much more that you had no idea about the sport.
It totally is. You have to trust the process. It's hard to teach, but you can live by example. Here's another anecdote. I worked on a picture called We the Animals for Jeremiah Zager, who's from Philly. Now, after We the Animals goes on to Sundance, Zager goes and directs the movie Hustle for Adam Sandler, which comes
Yeah,
out of Philly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, "Hey, Jeremiah, would you take a look at a scene that I'm working on?" He goes, "Oh, sure, man." And this is that peer-to-peer support that you get from other creative people. And he goes, "Man, your scene is rad. This is cool stuff, man." And so when you get that feedback from people before you put it out to an audience, like, you need that from your peers. And that's capital.
Hmm.
That's, coming from other people and their endorsement of what you're doing, and keep going. You're going in the right direction, because you're in new territory when it comes to discovering these things. And that's what gets me excited.
I love that you said that that's capital. Moving along those lines, I want to talk a little bit more about, retirement accounts and self-directed RAs. Now, I know you're you're not that familiar with it, but you do have some understanding of it. What did you think uh, before our conversation? Like, what did you think retirement accounts were limited to, if anything?
Well, I thought they were limited to, um, the traditional IRAs. You give your money over to an advisor, and an advisor says, "Yeah, we're going to put it over here. We're going to let it sit and let it grow." And what I've learned is that I can make some decisions around the things that I like or the things that I hear. So that's influenced me. And I'll give a call and say, "Hey, can we look up Roku?" Roku has taken off over the last 2 years. I don't know if you remember during um, COVID, everybody turned to Netflix. Everybody turned to Zoom. And I was like, I want to be in on that stock, those stocks. So, I mean, Zoom went up from $80 up to a few $100s, and it's corrected back down. But I've learned also by communicating with my financial advisors, like, okay, what is it? What's your goal here? What did you want to get? Because there's a time to get out. There's also a time to stay in. So, like, I'm learning a couple things. One is like letting something sit, like having some patience and not taking something out, even though it may not move quickly. NVIDIA is an example. I think it just sat and sat and sat, and then it takes off. So just learning that you can do some of those things with the help of a professional. I mean, there's people who do it on their own, but as someone who's creative, I want to focus on being creative in my work and leave much of that to somebody else who's following those trends. But I'll go to them and say, "Hey, here's something, man." And they'll do a little research on a particular product. And I've learned that women are really good at that. Like, they can pick things that they like, and they can find and discover those things that mean something to them. And those are as sound investments as anything else.
Is it because they shop a lot?
I think it really comes down to, like, what makes you tick? What do you like? And to trust that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. They say invest in the things that you buy or invest in the things that you use, which makes total sense, right? Because those everyday products that you use, 9 times out of 10, it's a successful company, which is why you're using the product. When we talk about self-directed, right? Does that spark like questions for you? Do you have an understanding of what that means when we're talking about retirement accounts, when we use the term self-directed?
I can apply that term to myself because I feel like I'm a self-directed person. If you're in independent film, it's about being independent, although it's also about being dependent upon other people who you can turn to for their skill set. I don't exactly I mean, I kind of come up with an idea of what that means for investing to be self-directed. I might be that, but don't even know that am like that's how I think and operate. I don't know if you could share more.
No, no, you're spot on, Michael. So when we talk about retirement accounts, there's like you said, there's the K or a traditional Roth IRA, and that's the most common account or retirement account that most people are aware of, right? Usually it's with a company, especially if you're with a Fortune 500 company, they may even match you. So if you contribute, 5% of your salary, they'll say, okay, we'll match you another 5%. But most of the time with those traditional Ks is most of the time, most people just give that over to their financial planner or to the custodian that the company hired.
Mhm.
They may interview you and say, Michael, what's your risk profile? Or
Oh,
what types of things do you like to invest in?
right.
Okay, based on that, Michael, we're going to invest your money in the stock market primarily, in NVIDIA, maybe some REITs, right? And maybe we'll move some of it to Zoom, right, during a pandemic if that fits your risk profile, right? Whereas a self-directed IRA, an individual has a lot more control. The company or your financial planner could be involved, but you have the option of not only investing in the stock market, most custodians would say alternatives. So you can invest in a film project. You can invest in another filmmaker. You can invest in gold. You can invest in real estate. You can invest and buy businesses. So when we say self-directed, it's really about, to your point, when you compared it to an independent film, you have that control and it gives you more flexibility. So in addition to some of the tax benefits, that's my goal is to educate my audience on, hey, there's a lot of people that don't really understand the power that they have with a self-directed IRA, where they're not just pigeonholed to the stock market.
I would say that I'm the type of person who leans towards risk, like most of my life. You to be in filmmaking, you're taking risk, but you're betting on yourself. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
I like that.
So do you having a better understanding of the self-directed IRA now, do you think more successful people would use them if they understood them better?
Yeah, I think as people build up this financial muscle or financial literacy, they'll start to demystify the process that you traditionally just put it in other people's hands and say, "No, I can figure this out too," and become confident in those types of decisions. And for me, I like that. If you see it as play, you become more comfortable with it, and you start to say, "Okay, well, that one worked out. Let's do something bigger." You take bigger risks, but you have a lot more information and a lot more experience
Absolutely.
as you do it.
Absolutely, Michael. So one of the I deploy a very unique real estate investing strategy. I coined it virtual wealth flipping. Very risky compared to the average investor. I will buy a property, and I've done this over 100 times, and I teach students how to do this. I will buy a property, borderline Ohio. I'm in the Philadelphia market. Never set foot in that property, never touch, never put any money into it. I will acquire that property. And because of my marketing background, I would then market it. If I buy it for $30,000, I would then sell it for $100,000 to someone who has not so good credit, who's tired of renting. Okay. They'll give me 6,000 down and pay me $700 a month for 30 years. And I'll tell them, hey, listen, you can do whatever you want to the property. I'm not your landlord. You're not my tenant, right? Just pay your mortgage every month. And a lot of people say, wow, Mike, that's insane. You don't do anything to the property. You don't even go look at it. Like, well, what if they stop paying or what if the insurance? But because I've done enough education around the process, for me, it's not as risky. Whereas the next person who may have never done anything like that, or my brother, for example, right? My brother sat back and watched me do this for 6 years and he's still scared to pull the trigger because he's like, Mike, I have to get comfortable around that. So to your point, right? Whereas you see risk, or maybe someone that's not as experienced in the filmmaking industry, they see what you're doing as such a huge risk, but because you've done the education,
Totally.
you look at it a little bit differently. And sometimes I have to be cognizant of that I am not as risk adverse as some other people. We all have our own risk tolerances. So thanks for sharing that, because you hit the nail on the coffin.
Well, like I said, there's two forms of resistance. Some of it's on the outside, what other people can't comprehend, and then what you have on the inside. And if you can get past the inside, forget it, man, you won because you're going to make those decisions that positions you to be successful. And yeah, I heard a little bit about your model, and I think it's like you're filling a niche in purchasing those smaller homes, and there's definitely a market for first time home buyers at a low entry level. Particularly, like, one of the great things about my wife and our homeowners is we didn't predict that the value of our home would almost double.
Same here. Yeah.
So then that allowed us to take out equity in our home and renovate the
Hmm.
kitchen and the bathroom. My gosh. Now the house, there's so much, and we did it at the right time. So timing is it's a key in the market because now the price of renovating your home has nearly tripled.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
price of lumber and 2x4s and all that stuff. Wow. We made that decision at the right time. So bravo to us for taking out the risk
I agree.
and moving forward.
I agree. I agree. And I think in the position that I am as a real estate investor, you start to learn and you start to hear of so many non-traditional ways to build wealth,
Mhm.
to execute different things, that sometimes the traditional means or the traditional media doesn't really, I don't, maybe they don't want you to know, but they just don't speak about them because they're not traditional. But there's so many cool ways, just like you mentioned with, pulling out the equity in your home. I have so many lenders that come into my sphere because they begin to learn about these alternative ways and these non-traditional ways where they can take a risk to reach their goals. So it's pretty cool when you see it. I don't know, when you hear other people stumble upon it.
I like to tell my wife, who works in state government,
Mm.
that I think filmmakers are some of the most creative problem solvers on the planet. We have to solve the problem. It has to be solved. Like, there's no excuse. There needs to be a backup for your backup, whether it's a location, a house, or an employee. You've got to have an answer, and you have to be able to move this thing forward. Otherwise, you're off schedule and you're going to start burning through money. So it truly has taught me how to solve problems and think about things that were unsolvable. It's like, no, it's like, so what you're describing is like another way of coming at this. And yeah, you actually can find capital and you can find things that can come together. I do have a real estate example. Recently, there was a family camp, and my mom and dad purchased it in 77. My mom needed to sell the family camp. I wanted to keep it in the family. The value of the house had grown up so much. It's waterfront property on a lake. And I just kept saying, there's got to be a solution. Got to be a solution. And the solution ultimately was partnering with my cousin, who's part of the family, saw the value in it as an investment. And we're able to keep the camp in the family as a
That's awesome.
result.
That's
But
awesome.
it was like, just keep turning that kaleidoscope until you found the right solution. Because trust me, I asked everybody, all different relatives, and they're like, "No, no," friends, nope. But then my cousin and her husband stepped up, and now we get to keep it in the family, and now it's a rental property.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
So the solution's there.
and I like how you use the analogy of a kaleidoscope. I'm real big on goals, mentors, wealth books, life, law of attraction, things like that. And I think it was not Bob Proctor. Oh, maybe it was Bob Proctor. Yes, he said, anytime that you have a problem, write it on a piece of paper, sit in front of a table, sit at the table, and just wait, think, ponder on it. Maybe take a couple of minutes, and maybe you'll leave it for a day or two and come back to it. But then he said, sit at a different side of the paper or sit at a different angle, right? Because to your point, right, when you say kaleidoscope, sometimes you just need to look at it from a different perspective or look at it from an angle. The answer is there, you're just not seeing it yet.
That's right.
So that's awesome that you shared that.
And I
Michael,
get that from a movie called Ordinary People.
Ordinary People. That movie is amazing.
He says there's a solution to every problem,
It is.
right? There's a solution to every problem, and like, there
You
it
just
is.
gotta find it. And I would go even further in saying that it's staring you in the face. You just can't see it yet. Because everything exists already.
It's true, man. It's true.
And
But you
that's
have
why.
to I have a practice where I sit and I meditate in my chair
Awesome.
outside in the
Awesome.
environment, 10 minutes. I did that this morning. I
Awesome.
journal. I come up with like solutions like, oh, there it
You
is.
see
I
the
hadn't even thought about that.
power of creation. That's why
That's it.
you are who you are. The imagination is so powerful, man. Why do you think retirement capital often aligns better with passive investments rather than active ones?
Well, from what I know about passive versus active is that it might be more stable and secure as you enter those retirement years. So, later in life, you want to lower your risk, I'm told. I know that was,
I was told the same thing. Yeah.
yeah, being advised to my mom and dad. I'm younger, so still, but I'll probably transition into something more stable to ride things out. But knowing me, I probably will just be putting the foot on the gas pedal to the end.
Yeah.
But everyone's different, right? Everyone's got and that's why you create like a portfolio. So
Yeah.
you have some things that are a high risk and some things that are just a little bit more stable. But then again, like this market is what's stable, that's changed. And not that it makes independent filmmaking a better investment because it's always going to be a risk, but you have something to show for it. You'll have a living document that in the case of a documentary, can go out and continue to impact people's lives and generations. Films have a long shelf life. So that's one of the benefits of having that level of impact on an audience, on the next generation.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And to your point about, risk, I remember engaging my financial planner and, he kind of gave me the same advice. It's like, you're a little bit younger, so, you can afford to take a little bit of risk. And like, I was like you, foot on the gas. My wife was like, no, put the e-brake on. And he was like, as you get older, yeah, you do want to kind of, dial it back a little bit. I'll share with you a story. I remember walking into a UPS store. I had to send off something for mail, and the guy was, working there. He was an older gentleman. You could tell he was a bit bitter. And any opportunity that he got, because I would see him over the course of maybe a couple of months working there, he would share a story of why he ended up there. That as soon as he was about to retire, there was a huge crash and he lost all of his savings, right? And, he just kind of felt like he was dealt a bad hand because of just the timing.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that happens to people often, right? To no fault of their own. It's just, the cycles of the stock market and things like that. So, I've always tried to make it a point to not rely on, you know, the traditional means of generating income, which is part of the reason why I got into real estate investing in the first place, right? But to your point, nothing is secure. There's risk in everything that we do, right? I think the best thing that we can just do is just make sure that we choose a lane that we're comfortable with, that speaks to us internally, and educate ourselves as much as we can to prepare and to hedge, right? Another question for you. What appeals to you about lending, if any? Ownership or operations? Have you ever lent on anything or invested in any projects yourself?
Well, like I said early on, I always invested in my own works in addition to raising funds from others, but it seemed to always require my own cash commitment. In fact, that's how I started this latest series. I still did it, brown and white. I had to kick it off with a $10,000 investment, go out and start filming and then show people that this is possible. And they're like, wow, they got excited about it. So I forget your question. I don't know if you could just.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Is what appeals to you about that? Like when you're investing in these, especially when you're investing in yourself or maybe others' projects. Is it is there a piece of ownership that's more kind of attractive, or is it more about the operations when you're looking at it from that perspective?
Well, I'm not going to say there's not a financial return because I know the long-term impact of a documentary, like my very first one that's still on shelves and people are still watching. History has a very long tail to it. So it's a residual income that can go on and on and on.
That's the type of passive investment when you think about it.
Yeah. 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 You're not doing anything after a while and it just keeps it's still out there generating revenue.
But yeah, that's the cool thing about like media and content. We
Right.
say content from marketing perspective. You can evergreen it and it can always perform.
Sure. And the studios know this really well because it's about their library of movies. It's about what do they have? Because
Those
that
assets.
because you're gonna pull that out on a rainy day. You're gonna I mean, there are movies we all still watch, Groundhog Day or Saving Private Ryan or whatever it might be. Those movies are that last
Timeless.
a long time.
Timeless.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I love Turner Classic Movies. I mean, those movies are from the 30s and the 40s, you know? They're coming up on 100 years old. Those are great stories.
Interesting. So for you, it sounds like it's the more of the passive and the I guess the timelessness of it that it can always perform.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's what do they say about you get into the movies for a reason, for social cause, financial return, or some kind of fame. It might be a combination of those things, but they can all have a long-term impact, I suppose.
No, you just made me think. I wonder if there are investors that primarily invest in film and movies and generate a return that way. Is that,
For sure. For
yeah,
sure. There's a sort of a finite amount of them.
I bet.
And there's a database now floating around, thanks to Ted Hope, of like the top 50 guys who traditionally invest in film, whether it's independent or studio
Really
picture. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Because to your point, if you can find, I don't want to say bet on the right horse, but I would think it would be more along the lines of finding something that you believe in, that you're passionate about, and put dollars behind it. And the returns, to your point, it's kind of like music and what's that's called the royalties. Is that
right.
similar with film? Film offers royalties.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's key. At least in the documentary world, to get people to invest in something, they want to know the impact that a story is going to have. So they call that impact producing. How is this going to impact the audience? How is this going to create change in a community? One is raising awareness, but okay, we want to change legislation around a particular issue, whether it's clean drinking water or climate, or how do we balance out the social economics, or healthcare, things like that, whatever that might be. But those long-term effects, the impact needs to be somewhat measurable.
Mhm,
So those are reasons why people might certainly you got to find a match
mhm,
for
mhm,
your subject with the interests of an investor.
mhm, mhm. So I'm glad you gave me that context. So very similar. I created a debt fund. It's a 6C, so it allows me to market it to any and everyone. But in order for them to invest in the fund, they have to be accredited.
Okay, yep.
Generally, when you create a fund, you're really targeting equity firms, private equity firms, family offices. They have big money. $1 million is like small change to these guys. And to your point, what we did is we want to position our fund as impact, right? Providing homes for
Yeah,
individuals who can't
right.
get ownership. And to your point, the challenge, if we want to say it's a challenge, is really finding the match, right? We need to find someone big enough who is like, yes, we are passionate about the home ownership problem, right? Like what you guys are doing. We want to write a check. We want to get to know you. So it's interesting that, to your point, it's the same on the film side, especially with documentaries, because documentaries, I feel, are all around like some type of impact, right? It's either providing awareness or educating or trying to change perspectives.
It's one of the things I'm told that I have, which is this I have this sense of story. But also I don't shy away from the marketing side. And you tie the marketing in with the impact, and then you're able to sell what you're doing, the long tail of it, um, how this changes. All right. So here's just like a little snippet of something else that I discovered within Brown and White, The Heart of Bonus Basketball. I'll probably come out in episode 4, which we got a little ways to go. But one of our graduates, who was a walk-on to Bonaventure basketball, goes back home and he starts a company called Game Over in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. which is one of the poorest of the poor sections of the 5 boroughs of New York City, where the high school graduation rate is one of the lowest. And Game Over is this after-school program that ties in education, buckets and bites, that's basketball and computers, or
I like
basketball and music.
I like it.
And if you can get a kid to spend 2 years in this Game Over after school program, their high school graduation rate increases from 34% to 100%.
He can prove that. He can prove the
He can
number.
prove that. He studied it for 30 years.
That's awesome.
Eric Hicks is his name, and he's got a great company, and he's in the apparel and trophy business as well. And I just thought, like, man, that is the coolest thing. Like, that's got to be part of our documentary, because this is not just what the guys did on the court, but what they did with the game of basketball afterwards and how it changed their community. And these kids are now having kids who are coming back to the basketball program. And these people are high school graduates, they're homeowners, they're marrying, they're contributing. And if you understand the alternatives to not graduating from high school, you are changing the course of a community dramatically, because someone has another plan for you.
Especially Bed-Stuy. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. So it's a solution. And, that's that long-term impact, investing in the right area and using the game of basketball.
And going back to your project, the awareness, right? Someone else may watch your documentary and be like, man, I want to work with Game Over, or we want to do something similar, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Documentaries are social, right? So they're solving social problems, and that's great for the economy. It's great for investing, and it's great for a community. Tax, getting more people who are paying taxes, things like that. That's how you grow a community.
Yeah, well said, Michael. Last 2 questions before I let you go. Thank you again. This has been awesome. What advice would you give someone sitting on a large retirement account who feels stuck in traditional options?
Well, if they have a large account, they have an opportunity to make a difference in the world, just as we've just spent time talking about. Independent films have a way not only impacting the audience of today, but tomorrow. So if they have that ability and they want to make a long-term impact, not just for themselves, but for others, I would encourage them to explore arts and culture, which are traditionally left to certain groups of people who can do that. But, that would be my advice and interest, because they can make a big impact on other people's lives.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what kinds of conversations do you think more investors should be having around retirement capital, if any?
I think just getting other people educated in this. This is really open to everybody. And that's what I learned about independent filmmaking. Like, I did not need, as someone said, a license to become an independent filmmaker. I just needed to go out and do it. So getting more people financially aware, financially literate, I think would be a health. I mean, we live in a capitalist society, and learning that can make us actually not just entrepreneurs, but philanthropic and giving back in different ways, and just raising everybody's journey through life here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Michael, how can people get in touch with you? How can they reach out to you? How can they learn more about you?
They can reach me at Mike at videosforchange.com. Visit my website, videosforchange.com. I'll give them my cell number, 518-441-5300. They can text me if they want to learn more about projects investing in independent film, the things that we talked about here. And they can learn more about our documentary that's right in post-production now, called Brown. It's called Brown and White, and it's at Brown White Story.
That's awesome, Michael. That's awesome. If this conversation resonated with someone who's built success and is now thinking more intentionally about how to deploy their capital, and if you're curious of learning more about self-directed IRAs and how they can be used for passive real estate-backed lending, you'll find resources in the description below. Thanks again for listening to Deployed. Michael, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Michael, thank you for having me on.
You've been watching the Deployed podcast, where we deploy insight, capital, and growth.